Day 224 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Juzzy here, and today is another quick update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine today. And as always, I like to start off with the Russian military losses. So in particular, we'll start off with the personnel losses here. So in the last 24-hour reporting period, there's been additional 200 Russian personnel losses there. Then we'll take a look at the Russian hardware losses. So in terms of armored combat vehicles, an additional massive 20 additional losses on the Russian side. Tanks, an additional 11 losses, so that's pretty large itself. 7 artillery and 4 choppers, which I'll get into shortly. Now, before I jump back to the map, just a bit of my own homegrown hobby on the captured Russian hardware from the Ukrainian side. These are the ones that are in working order, ready to go. So you can see, obviously, there's been quite an offensive from the Ukrainian side in the recent days and really in the last month. So we are dealing with a whopping amount more of recently captured tanks ready to go, a whole bunch of armored personnel, vehicles, and a whole bunch of artillery there in this case as well. Now back to the map, where Ukraine continues to make simultaneous advances in Kherson, Kyiv, and the Luhansk oblasts here. And I'll start maybe with a bit of a linear video today, so I'll really start from the top where things are happening. So we'll zoom all the way into, we know Kupiansk, that was captured some weeks ago now, and although you can't see it on the map, so we've got Petropavlivka, which is actually now also under Ukrainian control, which is great to see. Now we'll also pull up the date map and zoom out just to give you a bit of better context here. So we'll go back in the last day. So we are looking at yesterday's map, and when we go forward, we can see quite the push in the mid-rift section. Now this is pretty important in my opinion here. So once you go back and jump forward, you can see that the Ukrainian armed forces are actually taking and fully, not just maybe somewhat, but fully liberating some Luhansk Oblast territories. Like zoom in and we can see this settlement here. We've got Petrovsk there, so that's interesting to see. Now I find this quite important for a multitude of reasons, not the least of which is seeing the Ukrainian forces put up flags, talk to the local civilians in the region, see their thoughts and feelings on it. I mean, up to this day, when the Ukrainians liberate a town, they're very much welcomed by the civilian forces there. So I'm really interested to see if any part of Luhansk is the same as well. And in some measure, we already know that it is. Now, since I'm in this part of the map here, so we've got Svatov and Kreminna within the Luhansk Oblast there. Now, it is highly likely that Ukraine can now strike the key Svatov and Kreminna road with most of its artillery systems, which in fact or in turn means that it's further straining Russia's ability to resupply its units in the east. You see, Russia loves to supply and do its logistics or resupply with existing train lines, existing highways. Got a very important one here. So it comes all the way from the top to the Russian motherland, and it actually supplies a lot of the forces in the Donbass region there, allowing for, well, previously attacks on Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, additional support for maybe up to Bakhmut, that sort of thing. So of course Izium from the past. So it's pretty big deal that the Ukrainian forces have a bit of artillery fire control in this region, and certainly pushing the Russian forces back to these towns here. Now, since we are mostly in the Donbass region here anyway, I'll just mention, so places like Bakhmut, which I mentioned a moment ago. So Russian forces continue assaults on these eastern outskirts here, pretty much all of these towns. In fact, we'll use the date map and see what's happening. So no changes that we can see there. The problem with with Russia has been that they have not been able to break defenses in this area for about 2 months now. It's technically a stalemate, but both sides are really pushing hard to gain ground. But I'll tell you one thing here. So we've got Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. Now, the Ukrainian armed forces are very, very motivated to take these ones back. It would be a massive military loss for the Russian forces. Now we'll go through a bit further down on the map, and I might just touch on this Zaporizhzhia region or oblast for just a moment there. So as a result of the annexation, the illegal annexation by Russia, Russian authorities have banned local men of the age subject to conscription from leaving the Russian occupied territories in really the southern part of Zaporizhzhia here. Which is many things, but not the least of which is illegal, confusing, and concerning. I mean, you're going to hand a gun to one of these, well, many of these civilians turn into Russian war conscripts that are going to have no interest in fighting the Ukrainian armed forces. They'll go to that front line and call the Ukrainian hotline that's being advertised to the armies here, the Russian forces, to surrender. And by this stage of the game, everybody knows what that number is on both sides, everywhere on this map, because they're getting texts via Ukrainian cellular towers, if I can say that correctly. There is cards just floating around everywhere, cards. There's all sorts of ways, flyers, in order to basically give typically the normal Russian forces the chance to surrender, call the number, get picked up from XYZ location, and not the least of which is these forced civilian conscripts as well. And moving across a little bit more to the east, in fact, the Kyiv Oblast, really there's a town here called Bielosovka. Now, not usually a target in this war, maybe 100 kilometers or 60 miles south of the city of Kyiv there it is. So here we go. Now, Ukrainian aviation shot down 6 Iranian-made Shahid drones, but 6 or 7 more actually hit the town. Now, what's actually interesting about these Shahid 136 drones is these are actually fairly substandard kamikaze drones in the battlefield. They actually don't use a camera or even secondary sensors for navigation or target acquisition. These drones have to depend on these pre-input coordinates via commercial GPS satellite signals, such as GLONASS, it's called. So they'll likely strike within the zip code of a given target, but otherwise inaccurate. In fact, it's probably best said their best striking capability, these drones, is rather by striking terror into the civilian population, without having any meaningful military strategic effect the vast majority of the time. So it was believed that the Iranian forces who provided Russia with these drones, or really the around the country, it was believed that these were quite high-tech, but it turned out they were not. Oh, and I might have missed a location on the map there. So in particular, we have Nikopol right here. So no stranger to artillery shells from the Russian forces side, from the south side of the Russian-occupied Dnieper River there, but typically getting blasted to bits, and a virtual ghost town by this point in comparison to what it previously was. Then we'll move down to the front lines of the Kherson region. I'll switch out maps in a moment for something that's a little bit better, but this looks pretty good, this map still. So in the past 5 days or so, Ukrainian forces have liberated more than 1,000 square kilometers of occupied territory in southern Ukraine here, which is a story that looks and sounds very familiar, just like the Kharkiv takeback in September time. And from the US DoD, or Department of Defense, they've said that the Russian forces are poised for a major defeat in this region soon, and it does certainly look like it's shaping up that way. Now we'll just jump across to the other map that we have here. So it's a little bit better off in terms of, you can see the push, liberated regions, contested regions, which truly are about to be liberated there, just from previous experience. And here we go. We have now, I'll use this map for now because it's a bit better off. Now, the Ukrainian forces are very much using the T0403 highway. I've mentioned that in a couple of previous videos there. The Russian forces have been pushed back, and in fact, ongoing fighting here at the moment to My Love, Me Love, the name of this settlement here. Very, very nice name indeed. And just for a bit of consistency, now that we've seen that, I'll just properly move back to the map. So really, this is really contested. So in fact, all of this extra red we can see here, just pretend that it's chopped off with my preferred map here for the moment. So there it is, all contested. And as I even speak, I mean, the battlefield is ever changing. As soon as I post a video, anyone posts a video for that matter, things can change in an instant. But we do expect some pushes further down in this region here. In fact, Russian forces continue to leave villages around these sections and attempt to establish new lines of defense. Now, they can't exactly run away. I mean, the Antonivsky Bridge here has been blown to bits. Pontoons, barges, ferries, not in operation. The dam bridge, where there is a dam, is useful as a walking bridge, perhaps, but not all Russians are stationed here. We are talking kilometers or miles upon miles. So effectively, in other words, the Russian forces, and I've said this quite a few times, are a little bit trapped on an island here. So they're short supplied because of the land obstacle here and the lack of bridges back and forth. Speaking of land obstacles, this whole area could be considered to be chopped into 3 parts because we've got the Inuits river right here, which the Russians can't cross as well because there's also a bridge here that constantly gets hit, usually by some sort of high precision artillery or HIMARS system, probably HIMARS. And we are looking at, very much a pushing back of potentially, probably easily, 10,000 Russian soldiers here, at least. Oh, and Snurivka. Where is my Snurivka? There it is. I like this town for some reason. So on this map, of course, shown as Russian occupied, but Russian sources, interceptions, have actually said that this is actually now under Ukrainian control. So this is the west side of the Inuits River. You would think that potentially the Ukrainian forces would take the top, or the sort of the north east part of the northern bank of Kherson, but they're hitting it from all angles really, and of course they would need to. This is quite a strategic point here because there's a highway all the way down, pretty much to Kherson. And as I mentioned before, on the Russian losses page, there were 4 helicopters taken out there, 2 of which were in this very region here. So they're in Kostromka and Bruskinsky, which is right here. Currently shown as contested. At this point, probably not. But we had an Mi-8 Russian helicopter and an Mi-24 Russian helicopter as well taken down. Now, this is clearly... I'm trying not to repeat myself, but what's happening here is Russian forces are bringing Russian choppers to the front line, and they are extremely vulnerable here from Stinger missiles, all sorts of things there, manpads, NLAWs, all sorts of... Even javelins have a capability to take out the odd helicopter. True story, they don't use it that way much, but it can do the thing, do the job. I feel like Russia is continually not learning its lesson about bringing aircraft and choppers and even fighter planes for that matter to the front line for frontline support, frontline fire, those sorts of things. I feel like the Russian autocratic system in one way or another is doing this. We all know now that Putin is actually micromanaging the war effectively. So he may be completely speculating at this point, but I can only say what I see, and choppers are always going down here. So Putin would be saying, yeah, provide more air support. We need more air support. Do the air support. What are you waiting for? Go to the front line, provide that air support. And the commanders are saying, a bunch of yes men, okay, we'll send more choppers out. Commanders send the decree or the request or the command, of course, to the Russian pilots, the chopper pilots. They are not keen on this mission. They do it anyway, otherwise they'll go to jail at this point because they'll be defying or being considered doing some sort of mutiny. So they go to the front line, fingers crossed, do the best they can, and they're taken out. That's me sort of putting a lot of my own speculation in the middle there. We do know at the top end, Putin is micromanaging the war for the most part, more than ever now. And we do know at the bottom end, the Russian chopper pilots are actually going to the front line. So put whatever you want in the middle of it, of that story. They're just being taken down. And it wouldn't be another Liberation Day in Kherson, or the front line of the Kherson Oblast, without some old Soviet T-62 tanks that have been abandoned, destroyed, or even captured. So too many to mention in too many settlements, but I'll just throw them all up on the screen now. So many old Soviet-era Russian T-62 tanks here. And like I said, I think in yesterday's video, Russia's heavy reliance on these 1960s and 1970s produced tanks is quite astonishing, really. They've decided to put a lot of old equipment on the Kherson front line here. They had a lot more newer equipment on the Kharkiv offensive by contrast, but obviously that didn't do them any good. Kharkiv's been taken back now. Now you might ask yourself, how is Russia responding to all these losses, these liberated territories by the Ukrainian forces? Well, the Russian appointed deputy head of administration for the Kherson region told a Russian media outlet that the Russian military in Kherson is regrouping to gather strength and strike back. So good for them, keeping a positive tone amongst everything that's happening here. Now we'll move across to some news. So, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed papers on annexation of the occupied Ukrainian regions that were ratified earlier by the State Duma. So, this annexation has been widely condemned, of course, in the international community, but there was a country just today that was actually in support of it. Yeah. So that was North Korea. That's right, North Korea has supported the sham referendums that Russia had held in the occupied Ukrainian territories, claiming that they were organised in keeping with the UN Charter, quote unquote. But if a nuclear hermit nation is a dictatorship of a nation too, for that matter, is supporting something that you do, you probably know that what you're doing isn't right. Now, in some other news, as mentioned in previous videos, a $625 million US dollar military package was announced by the US for Ukraine. Now, a lot of things on there that you might expect: HIMARS launchers, which I mentioned yesterday, ammo, artillery rounds, precision-guided artillery rounds. Like the Excalibur, but one in particular that I like is the RAM systems, the remote anti-armor mine systems there. So they're pretty interesting the way that they work. So it's like an artillery shell in a way. It gets shot out. It disperses all these smaller, basically anti-armor or anti-tank mines, particularly there. And they're just on the ground, and then you've got your average Russian tank that will roll over it and explode. So quite a clever type of artillery or shell or really system here that the US are supplying. Now, in some other news, the Ukrainian main military intelligence director, also known as GER, claimed that the Kremlin, so Moscow or Russia really, is preparing for increasing distrust and dissatisfaction amongst Russians by training new units of Russian riot police. So there's plenty of footage of these Russian riot police going around, and these riot police are just savage against some of their own, the Russian citizens or Russian protesters, really. But also the irony of this is fairly readily apparent, I think, because basically the Russian government has the foresight to see they need to train additional riot police ahead of time. But for the military mobilization and general upkeep before the mobilization decree from the 21st of September, not so much. And just a couple of funnies to round off the day with here. So I don't think the first one's that funny, so I've added a second one. So the first one here, a bit of a news clip about the Russian forces no longer exporting the T-90S tank. So the S designation really means that it's exported to other countries, but instead using it for the war in Ukraine. Now, to me, this is funny because a country like Russia, which arguably, or not just arguably, but has the biggest tank force in the world, is clearly running out when they take steps like these to switch gears with their production lines or their exports as well. It's been known for some time in many different regions of the military-industrial complex on the Russian side that they are running out of certain types of equipment, so they have been stopping exports in multiple arenas of their military production lines and diverting it instead to the Ukraine war. And the last funny for the day. Now, I was watching a Russian media, sort of a news video, where the presenter was actually asking the Russian commander of, what's going on? Why is all this land being ceded? Why is Ukraine taking it back? And this commander said the Ukrainian forces are superior to theirs, so to the Russians. And their main resource is intelligence. Now, I realize that this one's taken out a little bit of context. I'll give the context there. But when you freeze frame on this, it's just kind of funny. It's true in more ways than one. What he was actually saying was they've got what I've been calling for some time, eyes in the sky. So satellites. He actually said their main resource is intelligence, talking about live satellite feeds. He said streaming to their screens to see what's going on. But funny nonetheless. I've given you two funnies today just to ensure that at least one of them hits home for you. So thanks for watching, guys. Please leave a comment, subscribe, hit that like button, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.